Epidemic of gun violence is taking a toll on children. The Gun Violence Archive reports that more than 6,000 children were killed or injured in the U.S. by gunfire this year alone. That's the most ever recorded.
The Cook County Trauma Unit in Chicago's Stroger Hospital, one ambulance after another delivers victims of the gang violence that just won't stop.
So we're going to be doing a whole bunch to you right now, okay?
This unit treats about 1,500 gunshots and stabbings a year.
Chicago's South Side. These streets are home to some of the most dangerous gangs in America. Last year, there were more murders here than in any other city in the United States.
And then you look at Chicago. What's going on in Chicago? I said the other day, what the hell is going on?
Democrats.
Two research questions, since it's me and Prince. We have the first one, which is how did the drug industry affect the purpose of gangs in Chicago from 1960 to present? And the second one is how did media affect the extent of gang violence in Chicago from 1960 to present?
One of the most popularized gangs in Chicago is the Black Disciple Nation. The BDs were founded in 1966 by young David Barksdale. The gang was nicknamed the Devil's Disciples based on their rapid spree of violence. Barksdale later became aware that his killing and violence between other gangs like Blackstone Rangers was endangering the African American communities. Barksdale joined Larry Hoover, leader of the GDs, to reduce the frequent gang wars and founded the Black Gangster Disciple Nation.
Black Disciples were created to protect Black people. Black Disciples became better known for selling cocaine, marijuana, and heroin in the 70s, but were put in a particularly bad light in the 90s due to their public murder of Yummy. There's a picture of him on the bottom right. He was murdered at 11 years old. He was a part of the gang. He was on the run for a murder and was killed by the gang. Young Lords are a really popular gang that it died out. It's not really around anymore, but they were a political activist group, but they started out as a street gang. They often had fights with Greek and Italian gangs, and once they shifted from that to a political activist group, their goal was for Hispanic immigrants to have education, housing, all of that, and they would, if they needed to take their actions out with violence, they did. Gangs of similar history as the Young Lords. They were founded in 1954. They are currently still active. They're in Humboldt Park. They wanted to push back against racial discrimination when they first came in, but then they stuck around to the 70s where the drugs were more introduced and the gangs became more about drugs and more about violence and loyalty and all that than actually protecting people.
Before we talk about the modern violence in Chicago, we need to talk about one of the most violent neighborhoods in Chicago that is currently known as O Block. It is important to know this neighborhood's history because it has a lot of infamousy and popularity and outside of the city, but very little is known about it. O Block was once known as Parkway Gardens and was built from 1950 to 1955. Parkway Gardens used to be home to Michelle Obama because at the time it was a relatively safe neighborhood. In the 80s, it was a fun place to hang out. The 80s was also the beginning of the crack era, so people would sell outside the Parkway complexes. A man by the name of Tokyo G ran the projects in the early 90s and was killed in 1996. Calumet Building was across the street and was ran by Black Disciples who gained money dealing drugs. Later, the BDs from the Calumet Building would move to the Parkway Gardens and have the complex filled with BDs who then began to make money selling drugs in Parkway. A person from Parkway neighborhood to remember is O.D. Perry and his older brother T-Roy, who represented the BD gang known as Buff City. The gang would later be known as Wick City, short for Wild, Insane, and Crazy, after BJ, Boss Top, and Big A joined the gang. Then, Parkway became the main hangout spot for BDs. Additionally, the BD gang known as 600 started in 2009. D-Thang, Lil Durk's brother, was a part of 600. Later, 600 would become allies with Wick City, and together they would frequently have physical altercations with the opposing gang, Jiro City. From this moment on, it was the members of Wick City and 600 versus Jiro City and EBT. They would have frequent meetups and brawls. Thang killed Hottie at the age of 15. Parkway became home to multiple different shootings, and the neighborhood became feared. OD, however, was a good shooter and a good fighter, and became the muscle of the gang. He also owned many guns, and the people of the projects felt safe with OD around, making him a loved and respected member of the community. Another important member of the Parkway community was Nikita Washington. Nikita was loved among Wick City members and unfortunately had a fatal asthma attack, rushing to her mother after finding out she was in a brawl. The Parkway community made Kita Day as a day to remember her. Now back to OD. OD was starting to shoot up other hoods to strike fear in other gangs, while at the same time defending his neighborhood when opposing members would come as well. OD became a very imposing threat to other gangs. From 2006 to 2011, OD was involved in 50 shootings and heavily contributed to the fear of the Woodlawn area.
You can't keep getting away with it!
In 2011, OD is riding his bike on South King Drive and a gunman catches him and he dies at 20. Members of Wick City gave Parkway the iconic name O Block to honor OD. All of the violence I have stated stemmed from gang aggression and efforts to offend or oppress another gang. Social media did not have a huge influence on any of the events, showing that social media started influencing gang violence in these recent 10 or so years. Additionally, the early black disciples of O Block gained a majority of their money and power from drug dealing. One of the most popular members of O Block was Davon Daquan Bennett, aka King Von, who frequently used his career in rapping to spread disrespect and hatred to his enemies. King Von once said on his song Back Again,
"We into it till you die, real street. At your funeral, I might just slide. Rest in peace, nigga. Shoot up everybody that's outside. Bet Wooski feel this one. I bet Wooski still twitching. He changed something different."
referring to when Marvell Williams, aka Wooski, was attending a funeral. Wooski happened to be one of King Von's ops, so when Wooski stepped outside the funeral to smoke a cigarette, 4 O Block members appeared and took shots at him, damaging his face and brain. The heavy popularization of disrespecting the late 15-year-old Shondale Gregory, aka Tuka, arose from the multiple disses given by Von, such as in his song Tuka Pack, where he says,
"Smoking on this Tuka pack and it's loud as vote now, call Tuka getting on the bus. I know Tuka mad as hell, he probably tired of, but when I die, find Tuka and I'ma beat him up. I kill on some real shit, that drill shit."
The term smoking a Tuka pack derived from when Tupac Shakur said that he wanted his ashes to be smoked by his fellow members. And once he passed, the Outlaws did indeed smoke his ashes. The GDs would say they would smoke Tuka's ashes as a sign of respect. So the BDs would also say it to mock them. Like when Chief Keef said on his song Off the Tuka,
I'm on Tuka! I'm smoking Tuka! Bitch! Don't make me shoot you! Bitch! Tuka! Pull off in Tuka! Bitch! I'm off in Tuka! Bitch!
Cut this shit the fuck off. What is it? Bro, what is he doing?
Tuka was shot and killed by black disciples for making fun of a dead BD by the name of Ty on social media. When Tuka was waiting at a bus stop, some people came up to him and asked him when the next bus was getting there. This let his guard down, and the 2 shooters shot him.
Right here though, this a real famous place, yeah? This is a real famous place, B. Hey, this bus stop, this is a real famous place, B. I ain't gonna lie to you.
Since Tuka's passing, multiple BD rappers like Lil Durk, Chief Keef, and King Von have dissed Tuka in their rap lyrics and passed their songs to the public for their vast audiences to hear. This led to the popularization of the term smoking a Tuka pack, as rappers who aren't even from Chicago started dissing Tuka, such as Young Ma, who in his freestyle says,
"A midget, I smoke hookah like it's Tuka blowing jet clouds.
For the love of God! For the love of God! Please!
Again, I send my apologies to Tuka. I never knew who Tuka was. I'm going to say it again. I don't know who Tuka is. Never knew who he was. Just finding this out the other day. My apologies. My meaning on it was some loud smoke. I said it in the line. I smoke hookah like...
Oh my God, bro. Oh, hell, man. What the fuck, man? Get your ass up.
One of the most evident stories of how social media inspires violence is the case of Carlton D. Weekly, aka FBG Duck, who was one of King Von's ops and an up-and-coming rapper. FBG Duck once made a song called Dead, where he disses multiple fallen members of O Block.
Business. Said I won't go this to dead, and okay, I did it. But T-Roy and OD them dead. Not for real, fuck them. All my ops. I go to D-Thing, gravy, take a pic on that shit. If Keita was alive, I make that big my dick.
You's a bitch. Bitch.
of 2020 that Carlton Weekly, who went by the rapper name FBG Duck, was gunned down in the city's Gold Coast while shopping.
Therefore, social media does have an increasing influence on gang violence in Chicago by rappers putting out disrespectful words or gang-related hate speech on their songs and Twitter, enabling other gang members to respond with physical violence.
1960s, during the Jim Crow era, not only do we see racial discrimination against Black people in America, we also see racial discrimination against Hispanics, and we also see some backlash against Asians as well. And in this era, you can see all different types of ethnic groups coming together to go against the Jim Crow laws that all of them are battling. And you can also see different types of groups like the Black Panthers coming together and the Young Lords coming together. And we can see these ethnic groups coming together to become militia groups to protect their ethnic groups, because we know in this era the police were not protecting any minorities in America. So these gangs were started for a good purpose. They started to shift throughout the 70s, 80s, and 90s, especially in the 80s during the crack era. These drugs became more mainstream, and there were drugs that were popular like heroin, marijuana, and crack cocaine. And in the 80s, there was more health research about them, that pretty much the drugs are bad. And that made the government make them illegal. After these drugs became illegal, but people were already addicted to them, they needed to find a way to have an easy access to get these drugs. Now that gives gangs a new purpose and a new way to make money.
You didn't play basketball or football, there's nothing to do but go home and shoot dice and get high or get drunk. But now with cocaine, you have something, a way to make money. And with cocaine, the ugliest person in the world, with a second-grade education, is the king, as long as he has cocaine.
The side of this map is the south side, the right side is the north side. But as you can see how the gangs are distributed around. North, we don't have that much gang activity, but down south we have a lot of gang activity. On the west side, where Humboldt Park is located, is the main territory that Latin Kings covers. On the southern side of Chicago, you can see a lot more colors. That's because there's a lot more gangs. There is the Gangster Disciples, the Black Disciples, and the Vice Lords. Gangs are in the areas of Kenwood, Hyde Park, and Inglewood. Gangs are so close to each other. That is what leads to all the violence, because they creep onto each other's territory where they sell their drugs, and